Welcome back to another episode of Keeping Tabs, where we get real about real estate. And this month, we've got something really exciting planned for you. In honor of International Women's Month, today we're going to highlight a woman who is helping others build confidence and independence through financial education, and really dig in and talk about how you can be a financially independent woman. And some of the tools and tactics and things that Ramat has to share with us today. And so we're really excited to bring her on. Look, she's written 7 personal finance books. She's a certified educator in personal finance. She's a mom, so many things. 20 years in a successful STEM career before she turned over to focusing full time on financial independence, having retired at an early age. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. So we are truly honored to be speaking with her today. And so without further ado, Ramat, great to have you on. Let's get started.
I am very excited to have Ramat too on as well, because obviously International Women's Day is here. We're in March, my favorite month, also my birthday month. And I would want no other person to celebrate this. Financial freedom, financial strength is so important. I have helped many women, single women, buy homes in the past few years, which has been amazing to do. So, someone like Ramat to kind of help us understand how we get to where we are, and financial freedom. So, welcome,
Thank
welcome,
you.
welcome.
Thank you, Zach. Thank you, Tabitha.
Yes. So I'm going to start off shooting some questions, and Zach, feel free to ask your own, but I had some questions to help us understand Ramat and what she does. So, Ramat, can you tell me your why and why you do what you do in your business?
That's a great question. It might take up the entire hour,
That's
but
okay.
so I think it's my why is really broken into 2 parts. When I first graduated from college, I started work as an engineer in an oil services company. And right around then, I graduated in 2001. And right around then, we had 9/11. We had the war in the Middle East. And almost all of my graduating class that started in that company got laid off. So I still remember I was on an offshore oil rig in the Gulf of Mexico, and I got flown back into the office, and I was told that I was laid off, that I was getting let go. And it was a day before my 25th birthday. So at the time, I was still on a work visa. So I had 30 days to either go back to school, get another job, or go back home. So I'm from Nigeria. And so I scrambled and I got into grad school. And that to me was kind of the start of my journey towards financial independence, because I felt so at a loss. I didn't have any of the safety guards. I wasn't eligible for unemployment. I didn't have parents to move back to their house and live with them. And it really, and I barely had, I think I had like $1,000 in the bank at the time. Fortunately, I didn't have any debt, right? So that kind of really started my journey towards financial independence, was that experience. And then the second part was when I got pregnant with my daughter. She's 13 now. I wanted to get to a place where I didn't have to work so that I could control my own time and spend more time with her. And I set a target of when she turns 10, and at that time I would be 45, but I did it a year earlier. So I achieved my financial independence goal at 44, and it's been great being able to carve out that time to spend with her, especially through those rocky teen years. If you guys have kids, or at least you've probably heard of those teen years. So it's been great being able to do that with her.
Yeah, I'm right in those rocky teen years. My
I'm
older
not
one's
there yet.
18, so we're feeling it. So yes. So wow. So you really, from what I'm hearing on that, is you had no extra support. You had to make it, and you had to make your own way, and you had to figure that out. So um
I mean, yes, I did. So I would say I didn't have kind of like your normal, perhaps institutionalized support, right? But fortunately, I had many people rally around to help me, right? I had professors from my undergrad days who put together my application and made sure that I got into grad school. Of course, I had the scores and I had the grades, but they helped in that way. I had my husband right now, but then, we were only dating. His mom put me up for a while at their house, while I figured out grad school applications and everything. So, I had like all of these people along the way that really provided support, but none of the kind of like institutional support that we're used to, like falling back on your parents, moving back to your parents' house, or getting on unemployment.
Yeah. So, my next question, in your experience, what do you feel is the biggest barrier that prevent women from investing in the stock market? Because I think that's one of the things that you might advise your clients, correct?
It is. So when I started the FI Woman in 2015, my goal was to teach women how to invest in the stock market because that seemed to be the easiest way to get into growing your money and achieving financial independence. You can start investing with as little as $1, right? There are so many opportunities now to do that. And one of the things that I would say I've noticed, and it's been shown to be true, is that women take fewer risks. And I think it makes sense that we do that, right? And that's one of the things that keeps us away from the stock market is we're a bit risk averse and we don't necessarily understand the stock market that well. It's not as if women have less financial knowledge than men. It's just that men tend to just charge in anyways, and women hold back a little bit and consider the consequences and their options, etc. So it's been shown that if you look at a woman's portfolio and a man's portfolio, a woman is more conservative and tends to do better in the long run because she's not there like tweaking and thinking she knows stuff, exactly.
Guilty. Guilty as charged. You called me out there. I feel exposed.
And so that is one of the things that holds women back is that we're a little bit more risk averse. It's not bad to be conservative and to take into account consequences, but I think we need to do better than keeping our money in a savings account.
Okay. Okay. And are you one to really do your own stocks, or do you have someone else manage that for you? Do you use a company to manage it?
So I do my own, and one of the reasons that I do, and I don't necessarily say that everybody needs to. There are some very simple things that people can learn, and they can manage their stocks, their own portfolio themselves. But if people feel more comfortable with a company, I never stop them. Even when clients come to me, if they want to use a company, I give them some recommendations. But the reason I do my own investing is because I used to be a financial advisor with Edward Jones, and I used to be a registered investment advisor. So I have all of that background and education, and so I know what I'm doing.
Right. Right. I would not do my own because I would quickly lose just any money. I have no clue about this. And it's so great that we have you on because I hope to be inspired one time. I have a company that does it for me,
That's
but
good.
I'm always curious about learning about more of it. And I would love to be able to sort of kind of navigate it a little bit on my own, but
I've got a
I'm
quick
not ready for it yet.
question.
I need some classes.
Yeah, I've got a quick
Yeah.
question for you too. Like
Yeah.
I'm curious in your definition, right? We're talking about financial independence and I think we all just sort of intrinsically have an idea of what that means, but like if you were to define it simply, like what would you say is financial independence that you're trying to accomplish for these
Oh my
women?
gosh, that is such a great question because financial independence could be a child moving out of their parents' house and being able to manage their own bills, right? For me, when I defined it, I wanted to be able to live, take care of my responsibilities, have a little bit of fun without getting a salary. So that was my definition of financial independence. I always encourage, and so what that means is that whether I go into work or not, I have enough money to meet my responsibilities every year. So I always advise my clients to define what financial independence means to them. So for me, because it was so important to have that time with my daughter, that's why I defined it that way. But for some other people, it might be that I want to be able to only work 10 hours a week. I want to be able to work at a part-time job and have enough money to supplement the rest of it. To them, that might be what financial freedom and financial independence looks like. And I think that's great. Like, I think each of us can define it however we want and then put a plan in place to get there.
Yeah, yeah. That's great. So I mean, so what you're saying is for everybody their financial independence and freedom is going to look different. And we're all coming from different scenarios, right? I
Absolutely.
think, our neighbor might have more means than others. And I think it's so wonderful when we all find out what's important to us personally, not our neighbor, because I think we're all coming from, some of us, like I came from a single mother who was raising us, so we had, different priorities when we were younger. For when I was a younger kid, the priority was getting food on the table. And then my mom always said to me that what was important, always have health insurance,
Mm,
that's important, and that was always so. When I got out of college, which I was able to go to because my mom pulled out a home equity line, which homeownership, so the ability to have a home. She worked really hard to be able to buy her own home, and she was able to support her daughters going to college through home equity lines, so that was a huge benefit for us. But her whole thing, and growing up is still in the back of my head, like health insurance, that has to be a priority of your bills. So when you're talking about when the money you come in, obviously you need a place to live, but you also, it was important to her. So I always thought that in the back of my head of making sure I was able to afford health insurance.
that's really great.
I think,
That's great because you're
yeah.
you're right. Like our background and where we're coming from shapes our idea of money. For me, I don't my dad was an engineer, my mom was a business owner. I grew up in Nigeria. I would say we were upper middle class. So I didn't necessarily have any we didn't get everything we wanted for sure, right? But I didn't have any basic needs that were not met, right? However, moving to the United States, I moved here when I was 20. I now kind of became my own person and the only person I could depend on. So that experience after college really shaped the way I saw myself here in the United States and how I treated money. And of course, moving here was the first time I independently had to do anything with money, right? Because before then, my parents were doing everything, they were directing everything. And so I think that experience shaped a lot for me. And if you were to think of like someone like my husband, for example, who I know would work till he drops dead, like, so it doesn't matter how much money he
Okay.
has, he's just going to keep working.
Right.
So for him, financial independence is not getting enough money to not work and have time to do this and that. He's going to keep working. So he would define financial independence as being able to have like the cars he loved when he was growing up, or to like travel to these places and do these things. So for him, financial independence is being able to do that, right? Me, instead, it's like, you know what? I will ride a bicycle as long as I have that free time, bedroom apartment, before I give up on that freedom of time and spending time how I want to spend time.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that's wonderful. I'm probably more similar to your husband, like even though I would probably continue to just keep working and working, but I do see the beauty of having the time with your children. And luckily, I've been a business owner my entire life, so have had, even though I work 7 days a week, I am able to, you know, bail out and go to a baseball game, or I make it a priority to always be at my kids' events, and I'm able to schedule that with being a business owner. Sometimes when you're not that, you don't have the flexibility to do that. So I think what you do and what you potentially teach clients is how to get and live your best life, because everyone that's
Exactly.
going to have a different definition,
Exactly. You're
like
absolutely
how
right.
what's your best life and how do we live it. And I think financial freedom is huge. And I also think for women, going back to women, we for some of us, if we choose to have children, sometimes that taking that time off from work, right? And how you don't lose your financial independence during that time. Because sometimes if we take some time off for work, it's hard to get back
It is.
into a
It
position,
is.
and sometimes you have to take a step back, and sometimes if you've been removed for so long, it just becomes harder. You're competing against the young kids that are coming out of college, so putting in place things that you do to offset that is huge.
Absolutely.
So tell like so if we're teaching young women coming out of college, or not going to college, maybe they did a trade, or maybe they just went right into the workforce, what are things that you advise to get started to create a financial freedom life?
That's a great question. I would encourage them to not take on a lot of debt because debt really anchors you in place. It kind of is a shackle, really. And even when you make a lot of money, if you have debt, it's something that takes away opportunities to either explore or to invest because you have to pay off this debt. It's always there, right? So, one of the things I would definitely advise is to live way below your means. Don't take on a lot of debt. I'm not saying don't enjoy your life, right? You should spend on things that matter to you, but first, take care of your future and the possibility of some unplanned event. Make sure you have an emergency savings fund. Every month, put something aside. Immediately jump on your company's 401k and get the match. And if you don't have that, then open up an investment account for yourself. An ETF, one ETF that covers the broad market is really all most of us need, right? Especially when you're young. So just put 10%, 15% aside every month. Take care of that and then spend what you have. But be careful about getting into debt. I know like whenever you're trying to share wisdom with young people, it's always there's always that thought of, well, you don't understand how it is today, or
All
right.
right.
And hey, we did that too, right? Our parents trying to tell us stuff, and we're like, yeah, right. You don't even know what's going on, right? And we try to figure it out ourselves. But if anyone is listening, I would just say try as much as possible now to put money aside, because the more time you have in the market, the more time your money grows. So you might put something small today, but 20 years later, it's grown a huge amount versus waiting until you're 40 to now start hustling to put money aside. The battle then, it's more of an uphill battle then. So I'm really fortunate that my experience happened at 25. Otherwise, I think I would have just gone down the normal path that most recent graduates do. I lived in Louisiana at the time. I rented a two-bedroom apartment. That was just me. I did not need a two-bedroom apartment. But when I graduated, I was making $52,000 a year. And that was in 2001. It was pretty good, right? I
Yeah.
immediately got a Mustang on credit. I mean, I didn't need these things, right? So if that experience didn't happen to me, as soon as I got laid off, of course I sold the Mustang. Of course, the apartment was gone. I drove a VW Jetta used. I think I bought it for $1,500 up until when I graduated from grad school and was working, right? And I think I didn't buy my a new car until the car I have right now, which is a 2017. So a 2017 was like the first new car that I bought, and now it's 20, like it's what, almost 8 years old. So I would say that my experience was great because it started me early. Otherwise, I would have been on the same path that most recent graduates go. We take on debt because that's what you do. Go and buy a house that's too big for you. All of that, right? So I would just advise that be careful with your money. Try to be independent, even if you're married. So I tell my husband, like, hey, you know what? If one day, this is a joke, if one day you go out for a pack of cigarettes and you never come back, we'll be fine.
Hmm.
Hey,
So,
right.
like, even if you're married, even if you're in love, all of that, just make sure that you have some money for yourself. Make sure you're financially independent. And it doesn't mean that you don't love your husband or that they don't love you. You just never know what could potentially happen, right? So,
Yeah, I mean, and growing up with a single mom, raising, I always had that in the back of my head as well as, and I tried to. Um, I have nieces, all nieces on my family. I only got girls, and I just hope for them that, um, with what we grew up with as children, it's like you never want to be forced to one stay in a
right,
relationship because of a financial
right.
situation, which I've seen a lot happen. I've seen people that stay in marriages just because
Yeah,
there's just no out, right? Or God forbid something happens to your loved one, right? Like what is in place to make sure that you're going to be okay if something tragic happens. And a lot of times people, we had an estate attorney in, a couple months ago, talking about estate planning and things, because a lot of times people don't want to have that
right,
conversation, whether it's they don't want to pay the money to put a will in place, or they don't want to get life insurance. And not everyone always needs life insurance, but some people do. Like if something were tragically to happen to me, as pretty much the person that brings in the most in our household, our family would be suffering. So we have life insurances in place for that, because I would never want to leave this planet and not have them okay and not have our house paid off or something. So for everybody it looks different, but I think starting off as young adults, women or men, and starting right away
yes,
from right out of high school on a plan, a savings
yes,
plan, is
yes.
huge, is
Yes,
huge.
like even just developing the habit. So my daughter right
Right.
now, she gets an allowance, and I told her put 10% of it in a savings account. Just developing the habit. Recently, and I've been making her write a budget as well. So before I give her the allowance, and I don't scrutinize the budget. I tell her it doesn't have to be perfect. I want you to develop the habit of thinking of how you're going to spend the money, right? Does she always follow the budget? No. But I have her writing it down so that she gets into the habit of thinking about it, planning for it, and then she can work on sticking to it, right? For young people to even just develop the habit. So even if you earn $100 and you get in the habit of putting away 10%, by the time you're earning $1,000, now you're putting away $100, right? By the time you're earning $10,000, now you're putting away $1,000. So the habit is what helps you continue to grow as you grow.
Zach, I need to start saving more.
Yeah, same. uh,
I know. And I've like, even like the little things like coffee, like going out and just spending lots of money on coffee, which I have, even though I do love my coffee shops, I have cut that back, because it's just money. Go to the coffee store, at minimum, it's like $9, like between a coffee and a little something,
I
it's
know.
so you do that. It's just every day it gets to be a lot. And
And
even these, like, I'm talking to my teenagers now about like just fast food. Like,
yes,
did you need the $16 Chipotle bowl? We could have probably made the Chipotle bowl for the whole family for $16, right? Rice,
right.
chicken, beans.
And like, so when I was in my 20s and really putting money aside and following a plan, because of course you're starting small and it's growing really slowly, right? But then once you accumulate quite a bit, then it starts to grow really fast. But at that point I did what you were saying, where I'm watching. I was so strict with the budget. Like, I'm sure I was no fun with anyone, right?
Right.
But now when I look back and when I talk to clients, I tell them, you know what, there's no need to completely restrict yourself, because sometimes doing that makes it easier for you to give up, or it might
Right.
make it that your kids absolutely hate budgeting because your mom was constantly talking about that Chipotle bowl, right? Or whatever, right?
Right. Right.
So I always
Right.
tell them, like, just make a plan, right? So if you like coffee, you like eating out, etc., make a plan for how much you want to spend every month on that thing, right? And then just make sure that that's the amount that you spend. eventually, as you start to want other more important things, you might look at how much you've set aside for coffee and fast food, and maybe you reduce it based on what's more important to you at that time, right? So I try to like just tell people don't restrict yourself too much because then life isn't fun, but just make a plan. Don't just carelessly spend.
Yeah, I mean, these are all things that I have to keep reminding myself too, because I do carelessly spend, and sometimes you just have to look in the mirror, and I want to believe I don't, but I
I
do.
do
I
sometimes
carelessly
too.
spend on a lot.
I do sometimes
Yeah.
too. I think as long as we have a bigger plan and we are kind of sticking above that plan. So I know that I started by saying that I was trying to teach women how to invest in the stock market. But I do want to mention that real estate actually helped me get to my financial independence goals quite quickly. And I first read like from I think it was Rich Dad Poor Dad or something, and he'd talked about like assets, etc. And since then, while the stock market was easy to do, I had thought about, okay, I should get some investment properties. So at some point, I had up to like three investment properties. And when COVID hit was when I got rid of them. But real estate also helped in getting to financial independence, to my goals of financial independence. Of course, getting into real estate requires a lot more capital than just investing in the stock market. And not everybody wants to be a
Right.
landlord. It's not easy being a landlord, right? So I still
Right.
advise people to use the stock market as an instrument for growing your money and growing wealth. But if you're also interested in real estate, it's another avenue for doing that.
Yeah, and I have that conversation with clients because when we get a lot of investors in my business, a lot of investors find me, and a lot of new investors, right? So they come in and they're like, I want to invest in real estate and it's important. And I go through and say, here's the pros, right? Like the pros are, you have potentially depending on where you find a property, you're going to build equity, and then you'll have passive income, but how much money do you have now to
Yes.
put it? Is that going to cover the mortgage? Is it going to give you any extra after you cover the mortgage? So it's different for everybody, and sometimes it's more of a long-term gain for people, because if they do have to get a mortgage and with interest rates there's not a ton of money, but long term, I know my father-in-law who's been retired for a while, it's passive income now. So you hold it, and now at 70 years old, 80 years old, it's just income that's coming in. you know it was worth the hold. He wasn't making money in the beginning, but now it's good. We talk about that. It's not a get rich quick
No, no,
situation.
no, not at all.
Usually.
Not at all. And it's not as passive, like because people tout real estate as passive income. It's not that passive, especially like you said in the beginning. Unless you have somebody who's completely taking care of it and hands off, which also means that you're spending more money to pay that person to take care of it, right? You're
Right.
spending a lot of time with the your property, especially if you want to
Hmm.
do it right. But I did want to mention that that was also something that helped get me to financial independence. I remember like my husband and I were both engineers, and we were already working for a big pharmaceutical company. So we were making pretty good money, and my daughter had just been born. And we had just moved from Maine to Pennsylvania. So instead of buying a house, like a traditional single family home, we looked and there were some good ones, but PA taxes in some areas, like real estate property taxes, are like really high, right?
Hmm.
And so we said, okay, let's find a location that's good with lower property taxes, but let's get a duplex. So that's what we did, right? And it was a two-bedroom duplex. So it was just me, him, and our new daughter and a dog. We did that for a few years. And I still remember friends coming over for my daughter's 1 year birthday. And they're like, why like, I mean, they weren't being mean, right? But they expected that we should be living in a single family home with a yard and with a this and with a that, right? And I said that, well, this is what we want to do. we're living in this 2 bedroom duplex and we're renting the other side out. We own the entire property.
Right.
And once we finally moved out of there, we continued to rent both sides and then moved into our single family home, which we've now lived in for a little over 10 years, right? So things like that, like being able to make those decisions, like being able, and I won't say that I had that clarity right from when I was in my 20s. I mean, at the time we were making this decision, I was already in my 30s, right? And I had some money saved. So we were able to put down some capital, etc. But those are built on decisions that you make in your 20s. So before you
Right.
have the spouse, before you have the children, before you have the need for the big house and all of that, you can make all of these decisions that will help future you.
Right.
Even if other people,
Right. So
right,
important.
other people
Yeah.
think, hey, well, how you make this much money? Why aren't you driving a Mercedes? Why aren't you living in a big fancy house? Even if people question you, as long as you understand your plan and you stick with it.
Hmm. Yeah, your plan and your
Yes.
why. And people, the real estate market right now is so crazy. Everything's just very expensive and the wages are not
No,
really calculating in
not
this.
at
So
all.
you're right. People want a suburban house and it's like, okay, they want to sometimes just jump to that house. And I always say, you want to jump to that Pinterest perfect house, the house that you can take selfies on and look good in. But the reality is that house in a lot of markets is not
No,
available, especially for first time home buyers. So let's sit down and look at your finances and see what's a smart move for you. Is the smart move that house? Or is a smart move what you just said, a duplex that you can live in for 5 years, rent one? It's not going to be
no,
glorious. It's probably not going to be the best situation, but you're going to love yourself in year 6 and 7 when you can, go to the house that you want at
exactly.
that point
Yes.
and not feel like such a financial burden.
Right.
You also don't want to be house
No,
poor. And that's the other conversation is like you might have that perfect single family Pinterest perfect house, but if you're house poor, that's going to wear off very
very,
quickly
yes,
if all your money is going to your mortgage. So budgeting and all that and all those decisions are important.
indeed.
If you could, you do you have any financial mistakes that you can reflect on that you were like, I wish I did that differently financially?
I would say I already shared the ones when I first graduated, where I immediately
Hmm.
rented a 2 bedroom apartment. I bought a Mustang because I could afford it. So that would be one where, unfortunately, that mistake didn't last too long, right? It was
Right.
corrected. It was corrected for me.
Right.
Um, but then also when I was in college, I was playing with the stock market. I fancied myself some kind of like, day trader. So one of the things that I would say is honestly, keeping it simple when it comes to investing is really what works in the long term. Don't think of the stock market or investing as a quick get rich quick way. People get in trouble when they're trying to chase things that sound too good to be true. And they typically are scams or they're just too risky for you, right? So I would say that I fortunately learned a lot of mistakes early and I was able to proceed with a little more caution when it mattered most. Unfortunately, sometimes people learn these mistakes in their 30s or in their 40s, and now they don't have as much time to fix those mistakes. So if you're in your 20s, just slow and steady honestly wins the race. Like if you have maybe a little bit of something where you're curious, like you're curious about Bitcoin, etc., put a little bit of play money aside for that, but make sure you have your foundation of just steady growth in stuff that's, I wouldn't say too conservative, but stuff that's stable.
We've obviously been talking about decisions that you can make early on and things like that, and some of the steps that you can take in your 20s and even into your 30s. But, on some level, there's probably people listening who are thinking to themselves like, well, shoot, I might be a little bit late. So what do I do? What do I focus on? So what are some things that maybe some women who have just gone through a divorce, or or in some places now where it's like they're older, they didn't think that they had to become financially independent. What are some steps or some things that they can do now that may not feel as difficult because they don't need the time behind them, but can at least get started?
Well, that's such a great question, Zach. Thank you for asking that. I would say that one of the things that, and I have had a few clients who are older, and especially, like you mentioned, that have maybe recently gone through a divorce or they're going through a divorce. And one of the things, the first things I say is to give yourself a lot of grace. A lot of times women in those situations are blaming themselves, they're kicking themselves, they're feeling a lot of like embarrassment, shame, etc. And I always tell them, give yourself grace, right? And let's start here with a clean slate. One of the things I would say is always like debt. Debt is always a big it's always a big hindrance, not only because it's money that you have to pay back, but it robs people of their peace a lot of times. And so getting debt under control is one of the first things that I try to do. Taking a look at your finances and being very honest with yourself. A lot of us do mental budgeting or mental math, right? But putting it down on paper so that you're very clear about your financial picture is a great first step. Be honest with yourself. Even if you feel like it's going to make you feel sad, embarrassed, ashamed, whatever it is, but taking stock of your financial situation first and then starting to tackle it. When it comes to debt, reaching out to creditors to see if they will forgive the debt or if they'll reduce it is a great first step. Making sure that you stay with your job so that you're getting regular income, even when you don't like it. That's one of the things that some people come and like, I'm really excited about this business opportunity and I really hate my job and I'm going to quit. But I try to tell them that regular income is so important. Like, because that's what's going to help fuel everything else, even the dream of owning your own business, right? So making sure that you have that regular income. If you're someone who didn't work to begin with, finding something that just gives you income is a great start. And then from there, putting a little bit away at a time. Beginning seems like you're not even making a dent, but you'd look back 5 years later and you realize you've come so far. So making sure that you think of it as something that's long term and not something that's going to happen very quickly, and be patient with yourself and give yourself a lot of grace.
That was a great, question, Zach, because the reality is most of us are in that situation. Most of us didn't start saving perfectly in the
You're right.
beginning, and now, so most people are coming into this, and potentially listening to this going, I'm 45 years old. I have serious debts. For what I see in people's portfolios when they're looking to buy a house is, student loans.
Yes.
A lot of people are, I've seen 200,000, 300,000 in student loans, and they're drowning and they're feeling like, what, how can I get past this? So let me ask you your advice as a financial person of, we've gotten to a norm where we're seeing 100,000, 200,000 as a normal student loan, at the end of graduation. What's your advice as somebody, um, in that in going to college, and if that's going to be your outcome, do you have advice on that?
So I would say that people understanding in the beginning, and I think we're starting to do a better job of helping parents and the students themselves understand what the cost of education looks like. I think in the past it was just everybody needs a college degree. You're going to get a great job. Just take on the loan. You'll be able to pay it off, right? I think when I was growing up, I think that's what it was. Like everyone's just trying to get to college. But now there's so many resources educating parents and students about the cost of education. So I think that if people are able to understand from the beginning what dollars in student loans looks like, if they're able to visualize it, hey, you're getting, let's say you get a $60,000 job, a year job, and you're paying five and you're getting paid 5,000 before taxes. 10% of that is going to go towards your student loan. Like if people are able to like understand the impact of it, perhaps they're better able to go in eyes wide open or make other choices. You mentioned maybe someone doesn't go to college, maybe they do a trade. I think that's becoming more feasible, and it's something that we're talking about more, right? Not, you don't always have to go to college. There's a need for people in trades right now, actually in the US, right? And they make
There is
really
right.
good money. So I think
Hmm.
as long as we're able to educate people on all of the different opportunities and avenues, so that people are better able to go in eyes wide open. But I'll tell you, like it, I think it's easy to just put your head down and say, I'll figure it out at the end. My daughter, who's 13, says she wants to be a radiologist. And I think that's like what, 12 years of school, like, college, then medical school and all of that. And somebody in one of my financial chat groups had said that she was just graduating as a family doctor, so without a specialty. And she had $1 million in student loans. $1 million. Like I couldn't even fathom. I'm like, I mean, granted, when you graduate as a doctor, you're making maybe 300, 350,000, right? But a lot of that is going in taxes. Like, how are you going to pay off $1 million? You know? And so, even with that knowledge, and even with me talking to my daughter about it, if she says she's going to be a radiologist, are we going to honestly say, don't do it? So, I think it's very easy to just want to follow your dreams and then say you're going to figure it out later. As long as we're going in with our eyes open, wide.
Right. And it's not a big surprise at the end. And I suppose,
Yes,
it's having those conversations with these young kids that are, why don't you start off in community college? Maybe you save a little bit there
right.
and then go to wherever. As a parent of a senior in high school, a lot of parents and all of us are talking about having these conversations and what's important. And, it's frightening to see these loans come out. And I just know when we're going back to Zach's last question, what can you do when you're 45 and you're now trying to play catch up with savings because you were paying all these student loans in the past. It's just, it just encourages us more for our youth and our generation to have these conversations earlier on so that they are not in the situation that many of us are in today,
I
that we're
agree.
playing catch up for the years of the decisions we were making
Right. Yeah, you're
when we were
right.
in our 20s.
Absolutely. Like, so I try to have the conversation with my daughter that, saying, if you go to medical school, it's like, well, doctors make so much money. I'll be able to buy, like, I think there's a Ferrari or something that she really likes. I'll be able to buy. I'm like, well, you might not be able to buy that because you'll be paying this mountain of student loans. Like, so, like, just trying to have that, when you're 13 and when you have a dream, it might be hard for any of that to sink in, right? But hopefully,
Right.
we're having the conversation with them continuously, and some of it is sinking in. And, we're able to look at what kind of loans we're signing on. So that's another thing, too, right? When people who are my peers, who are in their 40s, right? When we were getting student loans, it was just that, hey, no one was looking closely at the terms. No one was fully understanding the terms. Right? So I think as we are understanding what these loan terms look like, even if you have to get a loan, perhaps getting better loans, and hopefully some of the restructuring that the government does or is doing will help make these less predatory. So we'll see, but I think a lot of us are more aware, and the kids now are also a little more aware. So hopefully we don't have a new generation of people drowning in student loans.
Yeah, student loans and debts. I mean, I remember when I turned 18, all the credit cards applications that
Yes,
started
that.
coming out at 18.
Yes.
It's like you don't even have a decent job. Like,
No.
how did you give me
No,
this?
like I mean when I stepped onto campus for like the welcoming freshman welcome and all of that,
Yeah.
there are tables from all the credit card companies. Sign up, and of course, like you don't know anything. 25% APR, what's
And they're
that?
giving you a free gift or
Yeah,
something,
I
like a
mean,
free bag or something. You're
yes,
like, sure.
yes. And so that's what I'm actually doing now. Like I formed subset of the FI woman called Flex Financial Education. And I'm trying to go into schools to provide early financial education. So if kids are able to understand, like, hey, like a credit card is not free money. If they're able to understand the difference between a credit card and a debit card, a debit card, you're spending money that you have in the bank. A credit card, you're borrowing money and they're happy to give it to you, but interest you're going to pay on it might be more than the money you borrowed you know and
Right.
so if we're able to
Right.
like get kids just their mindset, it doesn't mean they're going to be perfect or make perfect decisions, but perhaps they will make fewer mistakes than we did.
Yeah, I think that's great that you're getting into schools and discussing that because I think it's super important. What resources do you have for someone in their 40s, as far as what resources can you call out, or and we can probably put it in our links later of where can I go to get tips?
You know what?
Where can I go to get started on financial freedom?
That's a great question, because everybody's journey is different and everyone is um, at a different stage. You can feel free to like share my email address for people to email me with questions. I love taking questions and answering questions. I'm happy to do that. And if there is a particular place that I can send someone based on what they're asking, I will be happy to do that as well. So right now, I think like a lot of it is like the basics of making sure that you're saving money, you're investing. People have so many questions about investing, and there are a lot of great resources out there, but it all just depends on what it is that you want to do. And then the part about being in debt, I always advise people pick up the phone, don't feel embarrassed or ashamed. Ask if they will reduce your debt amount, ask if they'll forgive the loan. Do that. And then once you've done that, make a list for yourself and start to like make an actual plan. Sometimes people just blindly pay the minimum on everything and they forget about it. But if you make an actual plan, you can start to like see that you're making a dent. So please feel free to share my email address. If people want to reach out to me with questions, I'm happy to answer them and also direct them in specific places for their situation.
Well, thank you. We could probably be talking about this stuff for a really long time. I know we have already. You're just full of knowledge and insights and information that's just been really helpful. So thank you for that. I do probably have like one last follow-up question with this, and it's kind of in line with everything that we've been saying, but just kind of to close it all out together and tie it back a little bit to real estate. You've talked about how, we shouldn't be taking on debt. We should be living within our means. We should, sort of check a lot of these different boxes. And yet, on the other hand, we've also heard how for Tabitha in her family example, where her mom was able to use her house, which we think is like, well, that's probably the biggest debt that we're all going to carry. But as she built equity in that, was able to leverage that to be able to put her kids through college. So to kind of round us out, can you talk and sort of summarize in a little bit of talking through the importance of home ownership in this process of financial freedom and how that does still fit into this spectrum in leveraging that debt, but in the right way?
And I think that's such a great example that Tabitha has about her mom tapping into her home equity. And I would say that if her mom hadn't made some good decisions along the way, she wouldn't be a homeowner. She wouldn't have that equity to tap into, right? And if she was already drowning in other debt, then it would have been that much harder for her to like get the equity out of her house. So if the only debt that we focus on is our home, because I don't own my home outright either. I have a mortgage, but I ensure that the debt I take on are for things that appreciate in value. I was just describing that to my daughter, what depreciating assets are and what appreciating assets are. So if we're investing in stocks, that's an appreciating asset. If we're investing in a home, that's an appreciating asset. So I think if people are focused on getting their own home, making sure that they're not house poor, making sure that they're able to put a reasonable down payment, and then not tapping into their equity unless they absolutely need to your equity to buy an SUV, right? Don't tap into your equity
Right.
for stuff like that. Tap into it for your child's education or for something that is of importance and of value to you. So I think like homeownership absolutely does play a big role in growing wealth and becoming wealthy, but we have to be smart about it. You know, we can't buy $1 million house even if the bank says we can afford it when we're only making
Right.
$120,000, right?
Right.
So,
Right. And that's what got, us in trouble in
yes,
2008, right? Like they were giving
yes,
pre-approvals that they said you can afford. And I suppose if you had nothing else to
right,
pay
right,
and stayed in your house and didn't move, maybe you could afford just that payment. But realizing that even though if the lender, they don't do that as much now, but realizing that even if the lender gives you this pre-approval, what does that mean per month? And is that going to be okay?
right.
Like, are you going to feel comfortable with that? Because the lender might not know all the other stuff you do. Like,
Yes,
they might not be looking at your coffee habit every day or, your cocktail habit. Like they might not know
right,
that. So,
right.
making sure that you're going to be okay with foregoing your other stuff
That's right.
to make that payment.
Yes, absolutely. And homeownership definitely is a great way to build wealth and also grow equity if you do it right from the start. You know, don't go into it upside down already, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. I agree. You have lots of stuff that you could share, and I'm sure you could be with us for hours and hours and hours. I appreciate you really taking the time today to talk to
Oh,
us
thanks
and
for inviting
hopefully
me.
educate some clients and giving clients maybe some hope that if they're feeling not financial freedom right now, because that can lead to so much stressors and pressure, right? Like if you're financially not in a good spot, your health could be at risk
Yes,
because you're just, it's a big stress. So for those people listening that might be feeling that way right now, reach out to Ramat. She might be able to direct you in some good spots to get you on your way. And don't
absolutely.
lose hope.
Absolutely. And give yourself a lot of grace. Give yourself a lot of grace.
Yeah.
Be patient and reach out.
Well, Ramat, thank you so much for joining us today. Again, sharing your insights on financial independence and empowering women through that financial education and kids too, as you're working to get into schools. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank
And
you
thank
for
all of
having me.
you, again, as always, for tuning in, for joining us and listening. Again, in honor of International Women's Month, it's conversations like this that just remind us how powerful knowledge can be. Having a plan, being smart, using the tools that we have to accomplish the goals that we set out for ourselves are all possible. So reach out to Ramat if you're interested in learning more about financial freedom and independence. You can reach out to Tabitha. Her information will pop up as well if you're interested in looking at a home as an opportunity for you to be able to build wealth or to continue to grow your wealth. And as always, again, thank you for tuning in. If you found this valuable, please like and share it with somebody who might find it valuable as well. So until next time, keep keeping tabs.
Thank you.